So in case you haven't heard, there's a big 3-hour superhero movie being released in theaters in a couple of days. Avengers Endgame. It's that big of a deal. Everybody's talking about it right now, everyone including their grandmother. I'm so excited that I can't even contain myself anymore, that I have to talk about it on camera. It's such a big deal to me because I've been a part of these, not a part of these films, but watching these movies since 2008. Never did I think I would get hooked onto seeing Marvel movies on the big screen. It's amazing to see. We have 22 of these comic book movies that tie together one single story. And I truly think that's amazing. We live in a day and age where there are people out there that are able to do that. Back in the day, can you imagine the company Walt Disney fleshing out a character like Iron Man? No. There's something really magical about taking stories from a comic book and transforming it into film. Like, imagine, as an example right here, imagine taking stories from this and transforming it into this. You were given the responsibility to do this, and you're looking through the material, and you're wondering how do I do this? How's this going to happen? Imagine trying to do something like this in the 1980s or maybe the 1990s. It's a very tough job. How do you get a story involving someone or a group of people with supernatural powers onto the big screen? When you have a character like Batman, he's a character that's more grounded and relatable to people in general. Mainly because he's not someone that's shooting lasers out of his fingers, and he doesn't have a hammer that can shoot and absorb lightning. That's something that's very tough to put onto film back in the day. As time went by, there was more demand for there to be superheroes on the big screen. So we then had companies like Sony Pictures and 20th Century Fox bringing out the Spider-Man films and X-Men. And how they turned out, they're all right. But when you look at these movies now, they don't hold up so well, at least in my opinion. Fitting the plot of a comic book story arc into a movie as well, I'm sure, is a complicated thing to do. That's when cartoons come in. I still scratch my head a lot thinking, how do they do that within 20 minutes? And a prime example I always love to share is from Spider-Man the Animated Series from 1995, I think. There's this 2-part story that involves characters Spider-Man, Venom, Carnage, Mordo, Dormammu, and a whole bunch. The plot of this episode involves Peter Parker going to a Tony Stark presentation. Tony Stark himself shows off a portal device that's built to bring in renewable resources or something like that. And at the same time, Baron Mordo, the evil nemesis of Doctor Strange, he's there looking to steal the device. In order to get that device stolen, he uses his magic to bring an asteroid from outer space that contains 2 symbiotes for 2 specific hosts. 2 other characters named Eddie Brock and Cletus Cassidy are in prison. Eddie Brock gets infused by the symbiote to become the Venom character again, while Cletus Cassidy, a random serial killer, gets a hold of an offspring symbiote and becomes a red villain called Carnage. A very scary psychopath for a 1990s children cartoon. Both characters show up at the Stark presentation to try and steal the device for Baron Mordo in order to bring out the fire demon Dormammu into the real world. They get preemptively stopped by Spider-Man and War Machine, but unfortunately, War Machine and Spider-Man, they're overpowered by the 2 characters. They leave the device. Venom has a change of heart because he's partially in love with a psychiatrist. He gets rid of the symbiote with the help of Doc Connors to fall in love with the psychiatrist. Spider-Man and Iron Man show up, decide they want Eddie Brock to help them out to stop Carnage and Baron Mordo from using the device to bring in Dormammu. Eddie Brock takes the symbiote back to become Venom again. They go to the evil headquarters of Baron Mordo. They stop the device by breaking it or reversing its polarity. Dormammu and Baron Mordo get stopped. Carnage gets thrown into the portal. Eddie Brock as Venom sacrifices himself in order to save his love. The day is saved. How do you condense a plot like that into 40 minutes or so? I can't imagine the stress, but they did it somehow. That's because of the limitations we have with cartoons. There aren't as many limitations as there is compared to film. You can do so much with characters flying around and stuff. You don't need a live action actor in in a CG spacesuit or whatever to be flying around with a bunch of harnesses. Years pass by. We're in the year 2019. We can now within some time between 2 to 3 hours. So no matter how old you get, you need to stay wide awake for the entire experience. 2008 approaches and we have Iron Man, the first Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. Before we even knew there would be something called Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it's really awesome to watch. Still to this day, it holds up pretty well. It all started with Jon Favreau and Robert Downey Jr. working together. We wouldn't have a series of comic book movies if it wasn't for these two guys working together. Jon Favreau himself went out of his way to try and get a hold of Robert Downey Jr. to work with him. He knew exactly what he was looking for to put his Iron Man onto the big screen. As for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I don't know if it was I don't think it was his idea to make a series of films. It was probably Disney. But Disney itself, it took a big chance, a big gamble and risk to make this happen. But the fact that they've got all the money in the world to invest in the right writers and directors, producers, actors and actresses to make a movie like this, they're golden. They've got little to no limitations. We're now at a point of time where we can see 2 hours of a guy creating a series of suits of armor to fly around the world to stop terrorists from using his own weapons of mass destruction and stuff. It's awesome. Anytime you see Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, you're entertained from beginning to end. Anytime he's walking around on or off set, he must be a joy to be around. Robert Downey Jr. is a phenomenal actor, but at that time, at least I thought, Iron Man was the only film I've seen the guy in. I don't think I've ever seen Robert in other movies before. Until when I looked at his IMDb page and I realized I saw at least one film with him back in the day, and that was Back to School with Robert Dangerfield. He didn't have a major role, but he was a funny side character in that movie. I had no idea what his film career was like with all of its ups and downs. So, understanding his history and him going into this character, becoming Tony Stark, well, Robert Downey Jr. is Tony Stark when you think about it. It's really cool to see how far he's come from then. With him, along with the help and faith from Jon Favreau, it's simply because of these two we're privileged to have these movies in our lives. Their work together is great. I liked Iron Man when I saw it in theaters, and I was only able to see it because the one time I decided to be a rebel from high school. I skipped class. We were learning Macbeth in an English course, and I wasn't interested at that time. So when I thought about it, it was a choice between Macbeth and Iron Man. So it was a solid B movie. And so were many of the movies after that. Like, while all these movies came out and they were great or subpar, there wasn't any that had so much of a wow factor to it until the first Avengers film came out. 2012, went there to see it on opening night with a group of friends and was floored away. I only watched it recently, about a couple of days ago, and I still felt the same way as I did in the movie theater. It's that awesome. Thanks to the talent of Joss Whedon directing the film, it was a magical journey from point A to point B. And it was great to see these series of characters, the original Avengers team up for the first time to take down Loki and the Chitauri. The Chitauri. Captain America, the Winter Soldier. When that film comes around, I was blown away again. I did not expect there to be such a big tactical espionage story surrounding Captain America himself. Like, he's just a guy with superhuman strength and a shield. I didn't think he'd be that entertaining on screen, but he really is, along with all the other characters surrounding him in the film. It was at that film I was introduced to the Russo brothers, the two directors in charge of making that movie. And I had no clue who they were. I've never watched any Arrested Development before. And then these guys come around again for Captain America: Civil War. That was one of the biggest Marvel chapters that I'm familiar with the comic books. That was a book that was given to me and a friend of mine from high school, and I liked reading it a bunch. It was such a big arc in Marvel Comics that I didn't think it would ever be possible to be put into film at all. Until the Russo brothers come in, they had their version, their script of how Civil War could work. With all these characters and the budget that they had from Disney, it turned out to be one of the best Marvel films in this in this entire set of 22 movies. It's that good. Again, back to the plot. In the original Civil War, we had if I could sum it up, basically, it was involving a small group of amateur superheroes trying to take down some big-time supervillains on camera. One of the villains, named Nitro, decides to blow himself up in front of a school filled with 500 kids. Sure enough, the government cracks down and said, okay, let's introduce the Superhero Registration Act. You guys can't be superheroes with mass identities anymore. You work for us. Which then splits the ideals between Iron Man and Captain America. And then things happen. A lot of plot happens involving both Captain America, Iron Man, along with Spider-Man switching sides left and right, the X-Men having their own ideologies on Civil War. Speaking of X-Men, Wolverine rips off the head of Nitro. How much of that? How can you fit all that into a film? You can't. Disney didn't have properties involving X-Men, at least at that time. But the version of Civil War the Russo brothers wanted to bring out, it ends up working. We have a plot involving Captain America saving his friend Bucky Barnes, who was the Winter Soldier, because he knows deep down he's not a bad guy. He's a character that's framed. He's not the one that's causing bombings or whatever's going on in the plot of that film. But at the same time, there's still that political ideology with superheroes, where there is an incident it's not as tragic. It's nowhere near as tragic as a group of school kids getting killed. It's just more of just one supervillain getting killed off at the wrong place at the wrong time, causing damage to a building, killing about 30 people or so. But still, that's something big enough to get the government to crack down and try to get these superheroes to register. And Iron Man and Captain America are still split about it. Iron Man has his teams of superheroes helping out, and Captain America has his. They were somehow able to get Black Panther and Spider-Man into the mix. All the fight choreography in the airport scene is incredible. Eye candy everywhere. Everything from Captain America duking out with Iron Man to Ant-Man officially becoming Giant Man and taken down by Spider-Man, who uses a Star Wars reference. It's awesome. So how does the MCU maintain its momentum and get even bigger? Infinity War. Infinity War gets given again to the Russo brothers, and every single audience member in the theater is practically floored with what they see. We finally see the villain character Thanos get put into action for 2.5 hours or so into this movie. And this is a character that's built up since the end credits of the first Avengers film, and holy cow, the payoff was huge. Seeing Thanos on the big screen is no question the biggest and baddest supervillain that we've seen as of right now. And the most powerful too, with the plot involving the Infinity Gauntlet and the Infinity Stones being collected one after the other. Every time you have his presence on film, it's extremely intimidating. You don't want to be around this guy, but at the same time, you're curious to see what's going to happen next. It's really cool. The special effects in this film are spectacular. You actually get to see each Infinity Stone getting used for its purpose in the movie, and Thanos uses them in a very correct and meaningful manner. As for what was going to happen at the end of the film, I'm sure a lot of people were not going to predict that half of the characters end up getting supposedly killed off. I remember specifically looking at the corner of my eye, there were people around me on the edge of their seats, literally. Now with Endgame coming up, I'm pretty sure everyone's got an understanding of what's going to happen in the film. I'm sure there's going to be a way that just about every character that disappears will come back to life in some way, shape, or form. Thanos will get defeated, etc., etc. But to me, it's not about what's going to happen. It's more of how it's going to happen. How is it going to look with all of these eye candy special effects? How is it going to work when or if the Infinity Stones get taken or stolen? How's it going to look when or if they decide to use the green Infinity Stone to time travel to a certain area? The film is marketed so well, you can barely pinpoint how everything's going to be put into place in this movie. There's only one, maybe two measly trailers and a couple of TV spots for the show, and we're already a couple of days away from this movie being released in theaters. The only hint that I can get out of any potential time traveling is possibly Black Widow's hair. I think the fact that her hair goes from blonde to red might involve a little time traveling. Or maybe it's just basic hair cosmetics, which I have little to no knowledge of. Oops. The Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole. I love these films so much just based on how well they can string one single story together within just 22 movies or so. And on top of that, there's no questions we're going to have another 20 movies or so to look forward to. We now have an opportunity to see the X-Men and Fantastic Four getting their own interpretations through Disney and all that. We actually may even have a chance to see a good Doctor Doom in one of these potential Marvel films. Like, Doctor Doom is a major villain I'm sure millions of people will want to see on the big screen. That would be something to look forward to for sure. Doctor Doom, please please come to the MCU. These are not critically acclaimed films. These are not Oscar movies. This is not The Godfather. This isn't the Star Wars trilogy. This isn't even Shawshank Redemption. These are just comic book movies. That's all. I like them a bunch, and I always will. So, Avengers Endgame. It's going to be awesome.